Welcome to Dead and Roasted. What can I get you? Hey, all you listeners out there with testosterone like myself, you ever wanted to be a trucker? Or at least thought that being a trucker for a while might be pretty cool. I think all of us have thought that at one time or another. But I have the cure for those thoughts tonight, with a story featuring one trucker and his encounter with some sort of living, creepy poster nightmare. But this was real, not some creepy pasta concoction. If you want a creepy pasta concoction, I've got a new coffee to try out on you anyway. I'll meet you in the back, 'cause it's time for my break, and time to share some new scary work stories with you. These are tales from the break room, by the way. If you want to be the employee of the month, please take a moment to review and follow Tales from the Break Room on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Heck, even consider signing up to be a member at EerieCast.com. Plusus, where you can unlock members, only content, and more. You can also send us your scary work stories at East.com. Submit. Thank. N.A. You trucking on round of 17 from Burgess Long Haul Trucker. Here, you can call me Burgas. Been running routes in the eastern U.S. for a few years now, and for most of that time, I've been listening to this show. Most of my hauls were for furniture from upstate New York to Virginia. Part of my route took me along Round 17, a stretch known for scenic views, but also for being a bit deserted at night. I prefer driving late when traffic's light, so it was about 2 a.m. As I cruised through a wooded area outside, it was pitch black, with only my headlights carve out a corridor of visibility. Occasionally, I'd see the reflective glow of deer lights by the roadside. This area was mountainous, with steep drop-offs and minimal shoulder space. My CB was quiet too. Most drivers were asleep or on different highways. That night, I was midway between small towns when my engine sputtered unexpectedly. The check engine light blinked on. I cursed under my breath, guiding the rig onto a narrow turnout near an abandoned rest stop sign. The truck coughed to a stop, perfect to break down in the middle of nowhere, with no cell reception either. I'd have to wait until dawn or hope a passing trucker might assist. I grabbed my torch and popped the hood. Now, my mechanical knowledge is limited just enough to get my commercial license, but I wanted to see if there was an obvious loose connection here. The night air was a bit chilly and very quiet. As I fiddled with wires, I heard a faint click, click sound from behind the truck, possibly the cooling engine, but maybe not. I shone my torch around nothing, just some roadside gravel and a rusted guardrail returning to the engine. I tried to keep calm, then came another noise. This time, a gentle tapping on the passenger side door of the cab. I was getting nervous now. No other vehicles had passed by, so who could be knocking? I walked around. Then I shone my light on the door. There was no one there. I got the shivers. Then I climbed back into the cab and locked the doors, deciding to rest until morning. Stop being paranoid, I told myself. The tapping was just gravel, adjusting to the temperature in the bunk area. I drew the curtain, but I left the driver's seat lights on. Sleep wasn't going to come easily that night. That much I knew, but I still needed to conserve battery power. Minutes later, the tapping resumed. Soft, rhythmic. Heck, you could almost call it polite. Summoning up my courage, I rolled down the window an inch and called out, "Hello. I'm trying to sleep." No answer. Just the wind and the trees. Then from the side mirror, I swear, I caught a glimpse of movement, a figure scuttling out of view like a spider. I shot right up with goosebumps bigger than my eyes. The shape had been human, shaped, but extremely low to the ground, like they were crawling on all fours. Maybe it was a trick of the dark, or me being way too tired and freak out. I tried my CB radio, but the static just hissed. There was no one in range. I rummaged around my duffel for a tire iron. If some lunatic was out there messing with me, I was about to knock him upside the head. The minutes dragged by, the tapping came again from my driver's side. I quickly peered out, seeing at first just the reflection of my startled face. But then I swear on my life, there came a rasping voice outside, and I'm pretty sure I know what it said. Open up. I'd never been so terrified in my whole life. That voice was far from natural. I shouted back a threat that I was going to call the cops, but the only response I got was a laugh, which then faded away. I sat there, spooning my tire iron, like it was my long-lost wife. I recall being extremely sweaty, too. That's when the truck began to rock, as if something heavy slammed against the trailer. I could feel it shudder, and at the same time, my mind was shuddering, too. What was going on was I being assaulted by a large animal, a bear, but then came more banging, frantic and purposeful. The cargo area's door rattled. I reached for the interior trailer's monitor, screen which sometimes showed the cargo space. It flickered, but provided no light, just static. The rear door must have been locked from the outside. Right, I gathered up the nerve to crawl into the front seat. I swung my flashlight around, looking in the side mirrors, and I nearly screamed. A pale face pressed against the glass of the sleeper, small side window. The features were warped, dark eyes, a wide grin, and yellow teeth. The face disappeared the moment my light hit it. I turned the keys in an instant, praying that the truck wasn't completely dead. And I guess someone up there was looking out for me that night, because the truck sputtered to life. The engine struggled, but it held without hesitation. I ground the gears into first. The rig lurched forward, and I nearly went off the narrow shoulder, but I corrected it just in time. Whatever was out there screamed so loud it felt like it was in the cab with me. I gunned the accelerator, ignoring the risk of further mechanical damage. My wheels spat out gravel, and the truck roared onto the highway. In the side mirror, I caught one final glimpse of a gaunt silhouette chasing after me on all fours, and it almost caught up, but then it dropped away, fading into the night. I didn't stop until I reached the next populated rest area, maybe 15 miles up the road, even there under some fluorescent lights. I was trembling like a little girl. Since then, I've taken extra precautions, making sure I don't drive Route 17 alone at such a late hour, unless it's absolutely necessary. And I triple-check my rig, just in case I'm not going to get stranded with a freak of nature again. Lineman's late-night NI visitor from Electro Joe. I work as a lineman for a small rural electric cooperative in southwestern Idaho. My job often requires me to travel long stretches of back roads, sometimes in complete darkness, to fix power lines damaged by storms or accidents. There was one particular call about 6 years back that I will never forget. That night, around 11, my supervisor radioed me. A series of power lines were down near a lonely 2-lane highway that cut through farmland and patches of sagebrush. I grabbed my gear and hopped into my utility truck. Then I headed out. Light pollution is minimal out there on a clear night. The stars are brilliant, but the night in question was moonless. The sky was a deep black with clouds drifting overhead, and the farmland below seemed to absorb the darkness, leaving almost no light to guide me. When I reached the site, I realized the downlines were about half a mile off the main road, near a battered dirt track. After driving carefully, I parked my truck by a leaning utility pole and stepped out. My flashlight beam cut across the ground, revealing bits of wire strewn in the tall grass. Part of the pole was cracked, probably after being struck by some farm equipment. Earlier in the day, I noted the repairs needed, then started working 10 minutes in. I heard a soft rustling. I paused and swung my flashlight across the tall grass, expecting a coyote or rabbit. Instead, my beam illuminated a figure standing about 30 yards away. Whoever it was, they were wearing a hooded jacket, face partially hidden. They didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there out here. It's not unusual for curious ranchers to watch the repair work, but no house lights glowed anywhere nearby. It was pitch-black farmland in every direction. I raised a hand and gave a half wave, a universal rural greeting, but the figure did not respond. Anxiety pricked the back of my neck, and I shouted, "Hello there, you need some help?" No response. My pulse quickened. There was something unsettling about the situation. I tried to go back to focusing on the wiring, but my hands were trembling ever so slightly. I kept glancing over my shoulder. The figure was still there. No sign of approach. Then, out of nowhere, it just vanished from the beam. I hadn't even seen it move. It was simply gone for a moment. I figured I was mistaking shadows, but as I swept the flashlight around, I found the figure again, now standing at least 10 yards closer. A wave of dread washed over me. The posture was rigid, almost inhumanly stiff. My rational mind scrambled. Maybe it was a lost traveler in shock, or someone playing a prank. Except I hadn't heard a single footstep in the grass, and the stillness was unsettling. I decided to call out again, this time. My voice quivered. "Sister Mom, you're on private property out here. Do you need a ride out once more?" They gave no reply. A faint gust of wind rustled the grass, but I didn't hear them breathing. Or shifting, the figure just stared. I realized I might have to leave my tools behind and drive away. If this got any more strange, safety be darned, before I could decide something truly chilling happened. The figure tilted its head, and then took a massive stride sideways, covering what looked like several yards far too large a distance for a normal human step. My heart lurched, my flashlight flickered as if the battery were going to die, and that made me panic. Even more, I stammered an apology. I'm not even sure why. And I began to back away towards my truck, staying ready to jump inside. As I did, the figure's shape seemed to elongate slightly, like it was stretching, and I caught a glimpse of something pale under the hood. No feature as I could identify, just a pallid hint of a face. I dove into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and started the engine. My headlights blazed across the field, but the figure was already gone again, as if it had melted back into the darkness. My breathing was ragged as I spun the truck around. I remember thinking, screw protocol. I was not sticking around at the same time. I did dread leaving the lines. Unprepared, it was my job, after all. But my flight response was taking over, and I sped away down the dirt track a few miles later, safe on a paved road. I radioed my supervisor. I only said that I'd encountered a trespasser acting erratically, and I asked if we could postpone the job until daybreak. He grudgingly agreed, not wanting me to risk confrontation at midnight the next morning. I returned with 2 co-workers. We found my dropped tools scattered around exactly how I'd left them, but there were no footprints in the soft ground, just the faint impressions of my boots. Whatever, or whoever I'd seen out there, left no tracks. None at all. We patched up the line, and I kept my eyes peeled the whole time, worried the hooded figure might reappear, but nothing did. I've told only a handful of people about that night, mostly because it sounds so bizarre. A couple of the people I've told suspect it may have been a shapeshifter or a restless spirit. Others think I just spooked myself, but deep down, I know what I saw was real, and it radiated an unnatural presence that still makes the hair on my neck rise up. When I think about it to this day, when I get a call out for nighttime repairs, I can't help but scan the horizon, wondering if I'll see that shape gliding across the grass, waiting, and NA staring what happened on Ridgeview. Pass from Carlos S. Back in the winter of 2017, I worked for a small municipal road clearing crew in Colorado. Our town was perched high in the mountains, and we were responsible for keeping the roads passable whenever snowstorms rolled in. The job paid okay, but it did involve long nights of plowing in perilous conditions. My story begins in a fierce blizzard that struck one evening. It dumped nearly a foot of snow in a matter of hours, at around 900 p.m. My supervisor tasked me and another driver with clearing a notorious route. Let's call it Ridgeview Pass. It's a winding mountain road with hairpin turns and a sheer drop-off on one side in decent weather. It offered majestic views of the valley below. But during a storm like this, it became a white-knuckled drive of swirling snow and near zero visibility. My co-worker Ralph led the way in one plow, and I followed in the other, leaving tire tracks to guide each other. The wind howled like a wounded animal, gusting hard enough to rock our heavy vehicles. My headlights revealed only a swirling tunnel of snow, so I kept my eyes on the glow of Ralph's taillights. He was maybe 100 feet ahead of me. We made it to a stretch of road, basically a dead man's curve. There had been fatal accidents there frequently before the ridge fell away on the right and the hillside rose steeply on the left. There, Ralph radioed me. Visibility is terrible. Watch for rockfall. Then his static cut out as I maneuvered around the curve. Something flickered in my peripheral vision. At first, I thought it was a reflection of my plow lights off a roadside snow marker. But then, something darted across the road. It was a dark form in the swirling white. I instinctively slowed. My plow lurched as the tires momentarily lost traction, but I managed to keep control. I then looked around for the shape. It could have been a deer or maybe a lost elk, but with these conditions, any wildlife would likely have sought shelter, not just sprint across an exposed path. I pressed the radio button. Ralph, you see something cross the road up there? No immediate reply, more static. My nerves were on edge, so I continued forward. Slowly the blizzard raged, and the wipers struggled to keep up. Every so often, I thought I glimpsed movement beyond the guardrail, but maybe it was just drifting snow. Suddenly, Ralph's plow braked hard ahead of mine. I skidded to a stop, half panicked as I fought the momentum on the slick road. Ralph's tail lights glowed red in the haze. Then out of nowhere, they vanished. Not like he turned them off, more like something blocked them out. I radioed him. Ralph, you okay? Did you stall out? No answer. If his radio went dead, maybe his power had cut out. My mind jumped to the possibility that he had slid off the road. I slowly inched forward. My headlights caught Ralph's plow resting. At an odd angle, its front bumper partially wedged into a snowbank. I recognized it was near a turnout often used by hikers. In the summer, an area with a small wooden sign marking a trailhead. I set my brake, put on the hazard lights, and grabbed a flashlight to go help him. The wind nearly knocked me over as I stepped out, stinging my face with eyes. Ralph, I shouted. The swirling snow absorbed my voice. I trudged through deep drifts to the driver's side door. His plow, it was wide open, the interior lights casting an eerie glow onto the snow. No sign of Ralph inside. I swallowed hard. Could he have stepped out to check something and fallen? I swung my flashlight around. I was looking for footprints or any trace of him. There were tracks leading away from the plow, but they were shallow and scuffed, as if whoever had made them was stumbling about. I followed the tracks about 10 yards, shining my light in a wide arc. Ralph, I hollered again. Then my flashlight revealed something that turned my stomach into knots. The prints just stopped, right at the lip of the drop-off. There was no sign of a slip or struggle, just footprints in the fresh snow. And then nothing, as if Ralph had simply disappeared. Into thin air. I was really panicking now. I took a shaky step towards the edge, shining the light downward, hoping to see the shape of someone down there. Someone still alive. But the darkness below was impenetrable, and the howling wind beat me up from behind. Making it dangerous to even lean over, my brain scrambled for an explanation. Had Ralph climbed over for some insane reason? But that was an foot drop, at least. I radioed the municipal dispatch, voice trembling. "I can't find Raul. He's gone dispatch." Tried to calm me down, telling me to wait for someone to come out for a few moments. I stood there, looking around in the swirling darkness, calling Ralph's name but never getting a response. Then it came a shrill, piercing whistle from my right. It wasn't the wind. No, it was a distinctive, almost human whistle. I spun around in an instant, but all I caught was more blowing snow. Then it came again this time, closer. Goosebumps rose on my arms. The sensible part of me said to get back in my plow and lock the doors. But I couldn't leave Ralph behind, summoning my courage. I followed the direction of the whistling, which led me toward the trailhead sign. As I approached, I noticed a silhouette partially visible. In the near wide out, it was hum-sized, but crouched low, scuttling behind a boulder. I glimpsed what might have been a pale face with large, reflective eyes glinting in my flashlight. My very soul screamed at me to run. When I stumbled nearer, the shapes scampered around the rock and vanished. From my sight, I realized how vulnerable I was then, alone in a ferocious storm, searching for a coworker who seemed to have simply vanished. Another shrill whistle echoed now from behind me, as if multiple watchers circled me in the blizzard. My throat tightened, fear filling my whole body. I retreated, practically sprinting back to my plow, terrified that some creature was about to pounce on me from behind. ISL slammed the door, locked it, and radio dispatch, again urging them to send search and rescue as soon as possible. Then I turned the plow around, leaving Ralph's vehicle behind my headlights, picking up only swirling snow again in the mirror. I kept expecting to see a shape chasing me down the road, but there was nothing, just darkness and howling wind. Search teams arrived once the storm eased. They did find Ralph, thankfully, and he was alive, though he suffered quite a bit of frostbite, according to Ralph. He thought that he had hit someone on the road there, and he'd gotten out chasing what he thought was a limping form. But he says that's all he remembers. He blacked out, got piled up in snow, and was luckily found by search crews. Since this event, I am overwhelmed by guilt. I feel like I left Ralph out there abandoned in the snow. He could have died because I was so scared that I couldn't stay any longer. Would you have done the same? Or am I just a NA coward? The haunted site from Anonymous in the summer of 2019. I had a very bizarre experience while working, and if you don't mind, I'd like to share it with you today. I was working with a hydro seeding company in central North Carolina. Our job was to drive trucks loaded with a slurry of seed mulch and fertilizer to highway construction sites to revegetate embankments and medians. It's the kind of job that when people hear the name, they have no idea what it means. That summer, the state had a massive project along a stretch of rural highway that cut through heavily wooded areas dotted with swampy lowlands. It was late. My boss told me to head out before dawn to start hydro seeding. A newly finished embankment early in the morning, about 5 a.m. I arrived at the remote site, accompanied by a crew worker, Al called Jake. We parked near the entrance to a dirt access road. There was a thick fog all around, limiting visibility. We were about a mile away from the main highway, surrounded by towering pine trees and cypresses. The contractor's side office, essentially a trailer, was dark and locked up, so no one else was around. Jake and I hopped out to inspect the slope we'd be seeding. The fog made the place kind of creepy, to be honest. Our phone lights didn't do much. There were trees nearby on both sides. The only sounds we could hear at the time were distant frogs and insects. A few minutes later, we found the embankment. It was a wide slope of freshly graded dirt, leading down to a ditch that was filled with stagnant water. We planned to return to the truck and start mixing our slurry on the walk back. Though Jake suddenly nudged me. "Did you see that?" he whispered. I followed his eyes, and I saw a faint glow among the trees. The glow flickered like a lantern or a small fire. Probably a work light someone left on. Dude, dude, I suggested though. It was odd. We ventured closer to check it out through the dense pines. We spotted a figure pale, almost translucent. Moving slowly, I thought it was a reflection in the fog. Fog can make you see things, especially in the early morning, and especially when you're nearly alone on a very creepy sight. It looked like a person wearing a hooded cloak. My heart thumped a bit. We were supposed to be in the middle of nowhere. Suddenly, the glow blinked out. Everything was silent. Then we decided to go back to our truck. No longer feeling safe, once back at the truck, we climbed into the cab, locking the doors for peace of mind. The plan was to wait for daylight, or until the contractor arrived. Jake fiddled with his phone, while I tried to calm my nerves. When the knocks came from the driver's side window, I nearly jumped out of my skin. 3 deliberate taps that made both of us jump. Jake rolled down the window. Halfway outside stood a lanky man, mid-50s, maybe in dirty jeans and a tattered jacket. His eyes were kind of crazy looking all over the place. "You got a smoke?" he asked, the smell of stale sweat, and something metallic wafted in. Jake apologized, saying that neither of us smoked. The man stared at us, breathing loudly, then said, "You shouldn't be here," and turned to walk away. We watched him meander down the dirt road until he vanished in the fog. This uneasy feeling just gnawed at me, though it was not a very good night so far. With all these weird happenings, why was there a random drifter in the woods at around 5 a.m.? What in the world was the glowing figure about? None of it added up. Jake asked if we should call the police or something, but I told him we had no real emergency just yet, so we would just wait, hoping the sun would come up soon, and this mist would finally clear out. When dawn finally broke, we started mixing the hydro seed slurry. The contractor folks were still nowhere in sight, but work had to be done, so we overcame our jitters and began spraying the embankment. The morning sun did burn away some of the fog, but the low-lying areas remained a bit hazy. I climbed up the slope to check coverage while Jake handled the hose. I spotted some footprints. There. Footprints leading around the edge of the ditch. They were fresh enough to see individual toe marks. Marks, strangely, they seemed to appear out of nowhere by a patch of mud continuing for a few yards, then stopping abruptly. I thought that maybe the person had stepped onto some grass or a solid surface from there, but there was only soft mud beyond that point. So where did they step? After that feeling spooked, I scrambled back to the truck and told Jake he shook his head clearly, as unnerved as I was. But we had to continue on job to finish. Soon the day became humid, and the psychics started to do their thing. The contractor finally shut up around 9 a.m., apologizing over and over for his delay. We described the drifter. We saw he told us that no one lived around here. There was only thick forest for several miles, probably some vagrant, he said, but he'd never seen or heard of one in that area so far. Later that morning, as I hiked to the site trailer to grab some paperwork, I smelled this overpowering stench of rotting flesh. I followed my nose until I found the decomposed carcass of a large dog or coyote behind a stack of drainage pipes. Flies buzzed around it. The creature's limbs looked twisted and broken, and the eyes were gone. My gut churned. I called Jake over to come look when he saw it. He grimaced, saying how the torso looked almost caved in like something had fed on it. We warned the contractor, who just shrugged it off, saying that nature can be cruel, or was some predator's doing. But in broad daylight, the place was beginning to feel cursed. If you ask me, around noon, we resumed spraying the far end of the embankment. The forest line was just a few yards away. There the day had grown steamy, so the forest was alive with the smell of wet pine. There was suddenly this shriek. It happened so fast, it was so creepy, it curdled. My blood sounded like a woman. Again, we stared into the trees, but there was no movement. But then there was a flicker of light again. Deep in the pines, similar to the ghostly lantern from before, I heard Jake muttering a prayer. Then a branch snapped somewhere, and the light vanished. Enough was enough. We told the contractor we would come back tomorrow. He didn't argue. I think he saw how spooked we were, probably realized we were done for the day anyway. That evening, I called a local friend who worked as a wildlife officer. I asked him if he knew about the area, and explained we'd seen a suspicious person in these weird lights and sounds. He got quiet for a moment, before sharing that a few folks had reported strange sightings. There, glowing apparitions, screaming a rumor suggested a reclusive hermit. Row those woods rumored to practice black magic. He warned me to be careful out there. Over the next week, we finished our job in the afternoons, only with more crew than just us on the site. We didn't have any more direct encounters, though there was one co-worker who claimed he heard the faint screams on his second day. By the time we wrapped up, we were all relieved to leave that freaking stretch of highway far behind NA. I'm a ranger in the Redwoods, and I've got something to tell you from Alan. Well, the title of this story says it all. I work as a park ranger in California's Redwood National Park system, and I have a story that I hope you believe before I go on. I will say that I love the outdoors. I wouldn't be in this line of work if I didn't, but it seems just deeply human to have an eerie feeling when you're outside at night in the wilderness alone. Maybe it's just me, but whenever I'm out there after dark, and there's no one else with me, it always feels like maybe there's something watching. 2 years ago, I was on an overnight watch. The season was very busy. We had an uptick in illegal camping, and there were rumors of drug activity in remote clearings. I started at dusk that day, checking the known hotpots for squatters around 1 a.m. I parked my Ranger's SUV near an old service road. I was going to hike about a mile in to where we'd found evidence of trespassers. Weeks prior, the redwoods soared overhead, silhouettes in the faint moonlight. I had a flashlight and radio, but I tried to maintain silence. The forest was that unsettling type of quiet, and all I heard was the occasional rustle of a small creature scurrying about. I didn't find any new signs of illegal camping, so I had to loop back during this trick. Back, I heard what sounded like distant chanting. It was muffled but rhythmic. I stopped walking, and I looked around. Really sounded like a group of people doing some sort of ritual. I then started to move again, cautiously, following the sound. It grew slightly louder. I came to a clearing ringed by enormous redwoods. The chanting was distinct now, but I couldn't make out any specific words. So maybe it was a different language, or maybe it wasn't a language at all. I just remember thinking the last thing I wanted to stumble upon was some sort of cult ceremony, or a drug deal. I turned off my flashlight and let my eyes adjust. After a moment, I spotted a dim glow near the center of the clearing, and that's when I saw something that you're not going to believe. There was this faintly luminous orb about the size of a basketball hovering at chest height. The chanting sound seemed to emanate from it, but I swear to you, I didn't see any people there. No signs of a campfire or lamps or anything. Just this strange, pulsing pale blue orb. Something about it filled me with dread. Primal and intense, half of me wanted to back away. The other half told me to go look closer. Maybe it was something from space, some sort of extraterrestrial object. Or maybe it was supernatural. I stepped closer. The orb flickered then, and the chanting seemed to shift in pitch, as though it registered my presence. It was then that the orb drifted sideways, revealing something behind it. I wasn't alone here. There was a figure there, hum-shaped but extremely tall, and way too thin. It was so dark that I almost didn't see it, but now I could tell it seemed to be staring at me. The chanting sound reached a crescendo, then ceased. The orb blinked out like a snuffed flame. Then, and silence fell. My mouth went dry. The figure was still there, only barely visible against the trunk of a massive redwood. I then remembered my radio and fumbled around for it, intending to call for backup. But when I pushed the button, I only managed to whisper. That was when the figure moved, and I'm telling you, it seemed to float rather than walk. And as it moved, I smelled a faint ozone, like scent, reminding me of the air after lightning strikes, assuming like any person would. I began to freak out. My training told me to remain calm, but that wasn't about to happen in my freakout. I shone my flashlight at it for only a brief moment, and I glimpsed what looked like a smooth, featureless surface throughout its whole body. I ran away, then stumbling back toward